Welcome, everyone. We are here today with SCOPEinsight, Maryse Blom, which is COO from SCOPEinsight. And we're going to have today our second webinar of the Toolbox Webinar Series. So, if you were with us last week when we had ALP, you will know that our objective is to present the latest developments of the tools that were approved in the AMEA Toolbox. So today, Maryse will present the Scope Basic, Scope Pro, and Scope Input Retailer. We've asked SCOPEinsight to prepare a presentation that would stimulate deep discussions, especially on scalability and sustainability of the tools and how they can help you in your programs to also design scalable and sustainable projects and programs. But also we want to have a deeper look into the BDS ecosystems, the business development service ecosystems, and discuss its sustainability and scalability and how the tools also contribute to this larger vision of sustainable, efficient BDS ecosystems. And finally, we also want to have a look at the cost structures and discuss cost effectiveness with the tool owners of this webinar series. So with this, I'd like to pass the mic to Maryse. Maryse, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can I stop you sharing? Yeah. Please allow me to share my screen. And I can't multitask, so I need to concentrate. Welcome everyone, and good to see you all. I think we don't have a really big group in that sense, because I see a few of my colleagues here as well. So please, colleagues, jump in if you can answer some of the questions that I hope will come. Yeah, as Felipe mentioned, this is the presentation on part of the Toolbox Webinar Series. This was very much after the peer review process. So you will see that. To start off with, for the ones that, this is the agenda for today, an update on SCOPEinsight for those who don't know us. There are still people who don't know us, so I think it's good to revisit that. Then, of course, the scope assessment tools and how they fit in the toolbox, the peer review outcomes and our initial replies, what we intend to do with that feedback, because it's a really important feedback loop for us. And then also some brainstorm, exactly what Felipe was saying on how to scale, how to do this together with you as partners. For those who don't know us, very briefly, it is really our vision and mission is to develop a more inclusive infrastructure where the opportunities really are for the more professional farmer agribusinesses. So the more professional they are, the more opportunities they will get, and our mission is to do this in a systemic way, providing tools and systems and working together as partners with our partners to get that done. So use the power of data to do that, to scale that up, and to provide that business intelligence so that you, I hope you, all of you, can do your work more effectively and more efficiently, using less costs, less resources, but increasing your impact. So that's what we are all about, and our solution, the one. Oh, sorry, somebody is. Thank you for muting. Our solutions fit in 3 categories, and the first one, everything that has to do scope standard, everything that has to do with the graduation process, making the agribusinesses, farm organizations, cooperatives more professional. Using our tools, our platform. So that's all part of that initial one. And the 3 tools that are a part of the AMEA toolbox fit into that category. When doing assessments, a lot of data is gathered. So that's the second pillar, the scope data. And more that data is now used to do analysis, to add value to the tools and to the data that we have. And together with AGRA, we do a lot of work on the scope link, using again that same data, so still with while not making extra costs, to make those linkages to the financial sector. So these the ones that qualify do get access to to finance. So this is what our solutions. Our tools are, you probably know them. So the Input Retailer Basic and the Pro, those are the ones that are in the AMEA toolbox. Thanks to AMEA, we also have now developed the Scope Rapid, which I will tell a little bit more about later. And coming soon, you have the Scope SACO, which we are developing together with Glimmer of Hope and Self-Help Africa. So these are our current tools. As most of you know, we started off with the Scope Pro. Then IFC said, yeah, those organizations are, and that tool is too sophisticated for the organizations we work with. So together with IFC, we developed the Scope Basic. And then with CNFA, IFC, Bayer, and we also piloted it with Syngenta, we developed that Input Retailer. So CNFA is very much was part of that. And for the Basic and the Input Retailer, there are also curricula part on the AMEA toolbox. So with the Basic, there's the ALP. And for the Input Retailer, we have the Last Mile Retailer curricula out there that are aligned to these tools. So if you use those both, you can have an integrated approach. What is important, especially in this group, is then that's how also we use that peer review, is that we continuously improve our tools to meet the needs of the market. So we listen to, we try to listen to you, what you need and what you want in these tools. So we have a sort of an update cycle for each of the tools. We try to not do that more often than in a 2-year cycle, because every time we change our tools, the comparison with the last time is lost or lost for a part. So what we have done to mitigate that is that if you have used a tool and if after 2 years we have improved the tool, you can still use the old one to make sure that that data is comparable. So please keep that in mind when planning your projects. If you change over to the new tool because you think it's better, which it probably is, then you need to keep in mind that that comparison is not 100% anymore. So what we do is we identify needs, not only from clients, but partners and data users. So we gather it from everywhere. We track those, we keep those, and then in that 2-year cycle, we compile them, and then we plan the changes. And so we look at, completeness, how long does the assessment last? And that's an important one because we get a lot of requests to put things in the tool. But then if we would say yes to all of these requests, the tool would take so long that nobody would use it anymore. So there's a balance in there that we need to look into. But also flexibility and things. Some of these things I will come back to that later on at the end of the presentation, preferably, hopefully in a discussion with all of you. Then we execute it. So after planning the changes, we execute, we change questionnaire performance tabs. There are 2 parts in a tool. The questionnaire, which is a little bit easier for us to change than the performance tabs. Performance tabs, for those who know our tools, are more things like the products, the volume, that kind of thing. Those, if we want to change those, that's an IT investment. So those are a little bit more difficult to change. Well, and then of course we test review those tools before we launch them for everyone to use. So this is the cycle, and I think this is important to know. Also going on to the next slides. Then a little bit of an update on new things that are happening at SCOPEinsight, and I don't know how many of you know this already because we have mentioned it before, is that in our project and tool improvement facility project in Uganda, the MTIC project, we have developed a new tool called Scope Rapid. It is not an assessment tool and it does not measure professionalism in the way, and I don't think it will ever be linked to the IWA 29 in that sense. But what it does do is help at scale to look at a sector or a region or a country even, to really see where and where the cooperatives are, what sectors, and to analyze a little bit more in a higher level to see where the need is highest, and where the interventions can be made. So what should be possible is that RAPID can help segment and to see at what kind of level they are. If they're very immature, if they're not even registered, or if they already are exporting, for example, then you can already categorize them in different levels. So this is a new tool that that we have been using and implementing in Uganda, and now also with Agiterra in Ethiopia in the dairy sector. So this might be interesting to some of you. There's a box missing. Oh yeah. In the meantime, we do have spent a lot of time on business intelligence. And what do we call business intelligence is the scope data, and then doing something with that so that we add value to you, for you in your projects and programs. I must say that we are developing this. We're putting in a lot of effort. So I think my colleagues would not like this title of the slide, is that it's growing slowly, because they think it's growing really fast, but it's growing slowly and surely, and we need feedback and input from you continuously, because also here we have that feedback loop, and we need that to know that we're developing things that meet your needs. The way we look at these things is that we have a lot of standardized products. We have an online, we call this the essential package. And my colleagues are on the call now who are also helping make these essential packages, because now we have it for the basic, but we're developing it also for the input retailer and for the pro, and also even for a tool that we have called the agent. So that's the essential. It's an online system where you can, it's interactive. You can see here that tool where we can then click, and if you click and zoom in, you can really see all the scope scores, the benchmarking per dimension and per sub-dimension. So this is really, and it has more, it has demographics, it has, other information. So this is a tool that can help you, really sort of map out that BDS strategy that you want to do in your projects. Then, of course, which a lot of our clients still are using, is a PDF version of the consolidated report. It has a lot of the online version as well. It's it's graphs of where they are, but then, of course, because it's PDF, it's not interactive. And then we are working really hard on what we call the advanced package. It's also online. And we have now focused on two topics, living income and access to finance. Living income, I think maybe some of you have seen that we have done some webinars on that as well. The idea behind these two is that we have used the data pull the data. I'm not an IT or data expert, right? So I hope I'm going to explain it in a way that you will understand. We pulled the data. First, we developed a formula that informs living income and access to finance. What are the key drivers in living income and access to finance? Then with those key drivers that we pulled through machine learning to really see and validate, does that work? Is that true? Which questions really inform on these topics? And then we developed a weighting depending on the importance of that information, that data. We added a weighting to come up with a living income and an access to finance score. And we are almost done, and we want to validate this, but the access to finance one, we have already looked at it, and it has something like 70–80% accuracy of predicting if organizations are ready for finance or not. We're excited about this. We still are, it needs to be piloted, tested. So it's very first step, but I think these things can be added to your programs, if your programs are focused, have the access to finance goal, or are looking at living income. And living income, I want to add that this is very much at organization level, because of course we don't have member level data, but the organization, we believe, play a very important role to help create that environment for their members to create a living income. So those are the standardized products. And then of course, if there are more detailed information or customized products that we can do, we can help do data analysis. And this can be interesting if your program has very specific KPIs that can be reported on using scope data, or maybe a combination of data, and also how data can be used in M&E reporting. So this is very much based on needs, but if there are any requests on this for programs, please let us know. Now, so what about the assessment tools that are part of the AMEA toolbox? And then we are looking for the input retailer, the basic and the pro, as I mentioned earlier. These three tools have been mapped against the IWA 29 because we really believe in a standard. So we really want to, apply or meet these standards as much as possible. We always thought that the input retailer was not very, a good tool to map against it, because we thought, okay, it's not a farm organization, so how can it be mapped? But thanks to Felipe, it was mapped, and we looked at those parts that are relevant for input retailers, and there you can see the scores. And the scores of the basic and the pro, were already known. But this is very much for us an important element to make sure that we are aligned to the IWA 29 and hopefully to the ISO to be in the future. Now, a big thanks to those partners who have done the peer review. So the input retailer was reviewed by Nuru and Ricolto, and the basic and pro by IFC. They have been using these tools before, and Nuru was interested in using this. So I think when you're interested in using a tool, is a very good way to dive in deep into the tools and provide the feedback with that program in mind. So thank you so much to these partners who have done this and provided detailed feedback on that. Of course, one of the things that we like a lot about this review is that we hear things that are working. So where do these tools meet the need? And I think if I sort of take the big red thread through this, is that because these tools are standardized, they can be used worldwide. There's benchmarking. It can be used in different contexts and countries, in different sectors. And also that, and that's what I like about the feedback here on the basic and pro, that it allows the farm organizations to identify those areas where they can improve themselves. And that it can be combined with different training and coaching programs. So not only ALP, but also others that are out there. It just gives good insights into the strengths and weaknesses of these organizations. Then there are always room for improvement, right? So if we zoom in on the scope input retailer, the feedback that, we picked out a few that we thought were interesting. And of course, a more detailed feedback, we will certainly also process that with that tool improvement cycle that I already mentioned before. But for the input retailer, there was a question on adding more financial information for the access to finance purpose. And as the input retailer for us is sort of at the scope basic level, we always thought that this information would not be available, that these organizations might not have that. Maybe that's not true, so it's good to know. So, and then the next question we would have is, if they have this information, if we add it to the tool, how much longer will the tool take to do? And so that balance of the length of the tool, the time that it takes, but the added value of adding this information. So this is certainly something that we will need to look into. Then there was a question on, can SCOPEinsight not do the training with more specialized technical knowledge for the assessors? And this, I think, is a very interesting question, and I hope that we can debate that also in the last part of this this session. Because where do we as SCOPEinsight stop, and where does the work of our partners start? And it's always something that we struggle with a little bit, because we always believe that we are working with professional partners who can find assessors that already have that technical knowledge. So that is an assumption that we have. So we, so is it our role to train assessors on the technical knowledge? Or what we have done till date is that we advise our clients to recruit people for the assessor training that already have that specialized technical knowledge. It is, and this is maybe a sneak, our wish, it's a wish that we've had for a while, is that we do want to develop a training on what is professionalism and why we measure what we measure, because that is a question we often get. So that is something that we do want to do, only that is not always the same as technical knowledge of what, for example, an input retailer is, or what the technical knowledge is for, to really assess them in depth. I hope you're writing down your questions. Then we have the peer review for the basic and the pro. I grouped them together. And yeah, there's a request for more transparency on the scoring process for the final scores. And the way this works is that there is a weighting in the questions that is different for the basic and the pro. So for example, and sorry, it's a little bit small. I was hoping it was going to be larger. But for the basic, for example, the internal management, financial management, and production base, they are weighted heavier than the other ones. So that's for operations, for example, and the link to the market, which is then the next level. And then sustainability, external risks, and enabling environment is then weighted a little bit less than the others. And the way we have done this is that those top 3 ones, in our experience, are the most important ones for the organization in that sort of time frame of development. In the more professional they become, the more, for example, sustainability is weighed heavier. So this is where the Scope Basic and the Pro differ a little bit. And then the way it works is that based on the answer question, the answer level questions, so how many tick boxes are ticked, that will determine per question what the weight is, and that will all add up to the eventual scope scores. So that's the question level replies that will add up to that. What is not added in the scope score are the performance tabs. So that's where there's a separation between those two. So the scope score really is a reflection of all the things that are in the questionnaire. Another feedback that came out from the Scope Basic and Pro peer review is how can we brainstorm together on ways how to improve the scalability of the tools. And this is where I really would like to go now, because we are so eager to exchange ideas on this, on how to scale up. Because what we see is that there are a few things that keep us from scaling up. And it's not only us, it's also the way that the tools are designed, so that there is really an assessor going out there getting that data. That really adds to cost as well. So how can the use of Scope tools be scaled up? So what we have seen is that the biggest challenge is the integral cost of assessment. So the total cost, not only SCOPEinsight, but all of it, right? So that's what we have tried to do here. And we added, assuming that we do 50 scope basics, and that we have 5 assessors, and based on these assumptions, we have costed it out with average numbers, right? So the assessor training, is part of the assessment. Then, of course, the assessor cost, the assessor that goes out there. This big blue part is not our cost, but it is a cost. So somebody needs to pay the assessor. And then, of course, with the scope basic, you have the cost of the assessment. And if you do so many, then you have the scope dashboard cost. So putting all these costs together, then each and every assessment, it adds up, right? So the question is, how can we bring those costs down? Or how can we have, knowing that we have made those costs, how can we add the value of this investment? So this is where we have been already for a long time trying to look into this to see how can we bring this down? How can we do this? So we piloted with a few partners on how to do remote assessments, hoping that it would be quicker gathering the data, the assessor not needing to travel so much, but the validation remained an issue. So so what we have now is, and we have a document that provides advice on this, is that if you do not know the organization, then it does not, we don't recommend going out, doing it by phone, for example. So that's a remote assessment. So for the first time, we always advise to go out there and meet them in person. If you know an organization well, you can update some numbers and things for a reassessment, maybe on a remote assessment. So this is one of the things where, and then still you need to ask all these questions, so it will take time. So I don't know what the time gain is for this, but it is something that we can explore more. Another advice that we can give is contract local assessors, for example, like our local expert network, because they don't have a day fee of 600. And it's more like 300 on average, or maybe 400. So there also a cost reduction maybe can be made. And if the cost goes down, then maybe you can do more assessment in the project. A lot of discussion has taken place on self-assessments. Can it be a self-assessment? Up till date, we haven't dared to do it because we always get advised, then you get information that is not trusted by the user of the data. So if people have ideas on how we can do this, we're happy to explore. I think maybe the Scope Rapid can be a self-assessment because it's more factual data, but it's something that we need to explore and figure out. Also, another idea that has been shared before is, can the tools be made modular so that we can cut it up in pieces and say, okay, I only need these 3-4 dimensions, and can I just leave out and not fill in the other parts of the tool? Because then it will take less time, again, bringing down the cost. The consequences, and this is what we need to again weigh, the consequences will be on the scope scores. Will they still be valid? And also on the benchmarking, because the benchmarking will be skewed. So it's we need to figure out what the consequences are. And if those consequences are things that you say, I don't really care, then it's fine, because then we don't use that data in the benchmarking, but then you can still do a few modules. That is something that we can consider. It's not something that is easily done. So I'm not saying that this can be done tomorrow, but it's certainly, if a lot of our partners say, yes, this is what we need, especially for the more immature organizations, because then you're not going to use it for access to finance anyway. So maybe then those few modules would be fine, right? So yeah, that's something that we can look into. But the other part is also that after having done an assessment, knowing that that data is there, how can the added value of that investment has been made? So are we, you, us, are we making the most of that investment? And that's why I also showed you that slide of all the business intelligence and the data and the analysis. And because we believe, and this is why SCOPEinsight started at the beginning, is we would like the data to lead to cost reduction in the capacity building, for instance, in the TA. Can we make it more focused? Focus only on the weaknesses and not train all the organizations on everything, what we still see in many programs. So are there ways to use that data to really focus on those things that make the impact and reach the goals of that project? There are also other ways to use data, like the access to finance part. How can we use the data, which is already collected, right? We already have it. So how can we use that to link them to finance or markets or input providers? So how can we make it better use so that it does make sense to do the assessments and invest this money in these organizations? The relationship will always be, and especially for access to finance, the institutions, lenders will want to know the quality of the data and where the data came from. So then it will certainly not be a self-assessment. It will preferably even be a third-party assessment. So that means that it's not the organization that does the capacity building, but it is a third party coming in from outside. And so that can be one of the ways to gather that data that can then be trusted by the market. Well, these are just some of the ideas that came by in the past and also things that we're thinking of, but we are open to all ideas. So I hope that by the time I open up the floor that you will have lots of questions to ask and that we can have that discussion that Felipe was talking about. So this better use of the data, the insights into the TA, BDS, lower intervention costs. Is that possible? Can we do that? How does that work? Can you please advise us how that works? So how can it make programs more efficient and effective, increasing the impact? I've already sort of said this. Also with the M&E, we are more and more speaking with M&E teams. And the feedback they give us is say, hey, this is going to really save a lot of time for us if we have this information, especially the online versions, where they can then play with the data and select those things that they need for their reporting. Or can the organizations or our clients use this for other reporting purposes? Can you report and use it for the donor? Can you report back to the donor and demonstrate what the progress has been with all the track record and the reassessments that these organizations have gone through? And of course, last but not least, how can you use it in your marketing? I remember that some of our partners have said, okay, I want to have a proposition in the market and a position in the market that I can say, hey, I can get the scope scores up by 1 point or whatever, or I can make them financeable within this time frame. That kind of way of marketing can also be maybe be beneficial. Then I think this is the final slide. Another way to add that value is that access to finance part. I just want to give you an update on where we are in this. As maybe many of you know, hopefully many of you know, is that we have together with CFI and developed the bankability metrics. And the bankability metrics you can see here, that is a format in what lenders say they need to do their pre-due diligence. So that decision, are we going to spend time on this organization and gather some more information and do a little bit more homework, or are we just going to discard it and not spend more time on it? So after spending more time on it, that spending more time means the due diligence. So this data does not take the place of due diligence. I just want to be very clear on that. But this data that we have, we already have this database with the assessments done. So with the consent of these organizations, these agribusinesses, we can share that data in this format of bankability metrics in a portal. And how can we then share it? So these lenders on this side, they can use their own criteria, because each lender has their own criteria, to find those that meet their criteria. So this is how we can, at scale, use the data that has already been collected for that access to finance purpose. And this is a system where we intend the lenders to pay for the access, and that paying for the access should cover over time the maintenance and the further development of the portal. It's my expectation that this will be, I don't know, take 2-3 years before it really is a commercial product. So there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of testing out, but this is something that could be added to your programs to do this at scale. And we can do that in a confined project for your proposal with the banks that we select. So that's what we can do. And that's what we will do in the coming year, 2 years, and test it out and see how that then works. AGRA has now also supported us in getting this portal pilot ready. And the expectation is that in the course of Q1 next year, this will be pilot ready. And pilot ready means really a rudimentary kind of simple thing without any additions or additional features or things. Those things will come later. We first need to see how that connection of the data can take place. Now I would like to open up the floor, and I hope that there are lots of questions.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you for this presentation. I think it was very interesting, very relevant in many ways. We saw many of your services and products. So thank you for this detailed presentation. I've seen that regarding data, there was one question on the process of data collection in the chat. I wonder if, Renee, if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question or elaborate your question to Maurice.
Yeah, of course. Hi, Maurice, and everybody on this chat, on this webinar. Yes, I've been writing reports for AMEA, saying that we are in a tendency of leaving the old ways of extracting data and not reporting back to our clients and to the farm organizations towards more participatory modes, which could be in the end a self-assessment. You have already explained that a self-assessment has its limits. So what can we expect in the general use of the Scope tools, Pro, Basic, in opening up a little bit more, or having the assessors afterwards working out on the data so that it can be explained? Because that seems to be a threshold for many organizations, that they, in the end, they get a report and they don't understand the details of it, or how they come about the results.
Right. For let's first say that we agree that the data and the information needs to go back to the organizations, right? Because that is what we advise all our clients. And sometimes later, after the project is ended, we hear that it wasn't shared. And then we think, okay, this is a missed opportunity, because as soon as you share it with the organization, that's when that first magic, even before you do any TA or BDS, that's already when they realize, oh, this is what the market requires me to do. So that's how important it is. That already changes so much. And we also realize that our reports, which are sometimes 50 pages long, automatically generated through our system, our reports were and are designed for the program managers, right? Not for the organizations. And so we also realized that if for the program or the project colleagues to go back to these organizations and go through this and explain it to them is quite labor intensive. So cutting down that, we are now, and we did it the first one with in the SACO tool. That's always great when you do new tools. That's where the innovation happens. And then we're going to go backwards, right? In the SACO tool, we have developed what we call an executive report. And I don't know if the executive report is the best name, but the executive report is, I think, Ardevan, 5 pages. I think, right? Something like that. And that means it has the highlights of that main report, and it is explained in a way that we are told by our partners that that is what they need. So this has been co-developed by a few AMEA members, and now we have that format. It is our plan to build that format into the system also for the basic, the pro, and the input retailer. And that should make it easier to report back to the organizations.
Perfect. Yeah. Would be a solution.
Cool. We will inform you when that's done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Renee, for the question, Maurice for the answer. I would like to ask if anyone else has any questions. If so, please feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Hey, Giga, I see you're on the call. So maybe, I don't know if you want to, you've seen the executive reports?
Yeah, in fact, I didn't see it, but we were in discussion just to make the executive reports as short as possible so that everybody can access and read it. Because one of the problem is that, as you said, the report is very lengthy, like 50 pages. Yeah. Now this has to be translated to the local language if it has to be used by the SACO leaders. So rather than going to translation of all this, if we have a summary report, we are discussing on the content that has to be included in the summary report. If it is like some 2, 3 page, 5 page, so it can be easily translated and it can be used by the SACO leaders. But yeah, I didn't see the final version of the table of content for the summary, executive summary.
Yeah, I think the summary report or the executive report is already done for the SACO, so you should at least have access to it. Otherwise, you can maybe ask Kate if you haven't seen it yet. And in that project, it is indeed the plan. We have now built it into our IT system in English, but it will be translated into Amharic for this purpose. So then the Amharic report can be shared with the SACOs that you have assessed. And then it will be much clearer for them.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, the summary report, which is part of the detailed report, like as the first
page. No, it's a new report.
It serves, yeah, the purpose, yeah.
Yeah, it's a new report, and it's, I think it's already been built into the system.
Yeah.
So you should be able to access it after an assessment.
Yeah.
But are there any discussion? Well, I was hoping for looking forward to the discussion on scalability, on pricing, on anything. Yay, Aniri, you're going to ask your own question, no?
No, I just wanted to go back to Renee's remark, which I thought it was very important. And I think you've already touched on that even before he posed the question, because you mentioned something that I thought it was very important, and that is the relationship of the capacity builders with the communities that they are working with. And so we are there to support the capacity builders as much as they can and hoping that they will provide that information. But if they themselves don't reach out to the communities in a way that they will involve them and make them very participant, right? Very involved and allow for that participatory process, it becomes very difficult for SCOPEinsight to, how can I say, to go beyond and have that direct report with the beneficiaries themselves, right? So I think in a way that the tool has been developed to help the capacity build. I mean, hopefully the agribusinesses as well, if particularly those that are in a higher level of maturity, if they can, you know, hire an individual assessment to see where they're at and then take decisions, receive some additional coaching, be able to get to that higher level, that's great. But it's sort of an intrinsic thing, right? Intrinsic thing. We need the support of the capacity developers to reach out to the beneficiaries in a way that involves them and makes it all participatory, right?
Thank you, Ranieri. Yes, if no one else has a question, I do actually, because it's a question of, I think, larger interest for AMEA in general, and I think it would be good to have it recorded if other people want to read, to listen to afterwards. So one discussion that we are currently having for a while in AMEA is how do we move from this project basis way of doing our work to a more systems change way of doing our work, right? So in that sense, I would like just to hear your reflections on whether there is a role for Scope tools in this move, and what role it is. I think you have already alluded to some of these aspects, but I think hearing your vision could be very inspiring to also discuss scalability, cost reduction, and other aspects that are interesting for everyone. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Felipe, for that question. And it is indeed, as I already mentioned in the beginning, we are all about systemic change. So wherever we can make those connections, we try to. And to give some examples, we have been working with AGRA on that access to finance part. So AGRA has also invested on that local expert network, right? So we now have 10 partners in a lot of countries who have already been trained, they know our tools and everything. So all that investment does not need to be made again. So using those local experts can help bring down costs, increase that knowledge to know how the tools work, know how to use the outcomes of the tools to provide that really targeted support. But also using that data and linking that to the financial institutions. So really provide that next level access to finance service in the future, right? To all of our partners. But we are really testing it out now. So that I think that's why we also consider AGRA very much as our ecosystem partners. Because together we're in this together. Let's put it that way, and to see where we can, learn, share, and not redo things too much. So where can we learn and standardize and build and not do things double? We don't like repeating stuff. Having said that, I think that the more projects and things we do in a sector or country, the more we can make the connections between those. We see also some of those examples. In some countries, we work with different partners, or a partner takes over a project from somebody else. So then we have already that track record of these organizations, and we can see, okay, are you making the right selection? So trying to, again, make those connections between projects and things. Our biggest dream would be to go away from that project-to-project approach. So we're doing everything in our power to see if we can, find a more sustainable way of working, finding business models or things for that ecosystem. I think it will still take, I don't know, 10 years before we get there, because and the donor sector, right, with USAID and all the Bill and Melinda Gates, they work in this project-driven way. They work in and they also don't look at standards, or they don't put the IWA 29 in there, or how to access finance, or the bankability metrics, or how can we get standards more into these requests for proposals, TORs, or things that are out there. I think that should be something that maybe AMEA can help do, but it's too much of a heavy load for AMEA. But I think we need to do that together to see how we can, get away from this project by project approach. But also, I mean, we can do it for each project also by building in exit strategies, right? How can we build an exit strategy? How can we empower local partners so that when that project ends and you go away, it will still continue, because maybe you have a local expert who has been, who has a business model and can maintain it and knows which financial institutions they can work with, and then it works on its own. So there are, I think, many ways to go about this. There is no holy grail solution to this. And also, one of the things we have been doing and are still working very hard on now is a partnership with some of our Dutch partners, and to really have an integrated approach called AgriGrade. And we are now currently with our partners, writing a proposal for the Dutch government, who really likes this way of working, right? Because it takes away overlap between organizations. And therefore, it is not easy, right? Because you have overlap, that means that some people need to sort of reshuffle and see what the roles and responsibilities are. And we intend to pilot that in 2 countries in the coming few years. So how that will work, what we will learn, we will share those learnings also within AMEA. And we're very eager to learn, right? Because the whole idea behind it is, and I shared it already a little bit in my earlier presentation, is with the rapid, really do that segmentation so that you have the right follow-up and the right tools at the right level of, it's not really maturity, but anyway, it's like the school system, right? You have the high school, lower school, high school, and then university kind of, that kind of thing. And that each level needs to have the right support, the right information. So what we have heard in the past, for instance, is that some people have used one of our tools and then came back, all the financials were not filled in. I said, well, why did you use the Pro if there were no financials? And then said, we thought they had financials or what. So it really makes a lot of sense to dive in deeper and to know at what level you're working. And then using that data that is then collected, and that this is, I think, one of the important things, is that collect data only once and use that data to make the different connections, right? So IDH, for example, is also one of the partners in this AgriGrade. They do a service delivery model. So looking at it from the corporates, from the private sector point of view, are they, what kind of investments can they make that make sense in that value chain? What if we combine it with scope data? And what can we learn from that? The access to finance part I already mentioned, looking at for example, the lower levels, the base of the pyramid. Do we need to have large international firms doing that at that level, or can we use smaller boutique organizations in country that have a lot of local knowledge and the experience using these tools? So can we make it cost efficient? Because now all the NGOs do all the levels usually. I mean, that's what we see. Is that the way we should organize ourselves? Maybe we should work more in consortia. So I'm babbling all over the place, Felipe, because we don't have the solution, but there are so many ideas on how to do this, and we need to find out what the best way is. And we do that in partnerships, right? Because everything we do, we are just the little small bit. Also in AgriGrade, we are the glue between the partners. That's true, but without the partners, we're nowhere, because then nothing happens. It's the data we can only inform, and that's why we're so dependent on partners, and also on, for example, AMEA and these peer reviews with feedback and things. Without feedback, we're nowhere.
No, thank you for these reflections, Marie. It's very interesting, and I agree. No, there's no right answer or no clear answer. I think it's a work in partnerships that will lead us to many possible answers. But I also heard you alluding to the localization aspect of the AgriGrade, which is a concept that's coming back in donor vocabulary and wish, right, to see happening. So in that sense, I just wonder, you mentioned also there you're going to pilot the AgriGrade in a few countries. I think you mentioned 2, but which countries are these, and how could perhaps local partners, local actors get involved?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I want to say too much on the countries where we because we're still working on that with our partners. But I think what is important, the way AgriGrade will work, is that we will set some criteria, what we need for each of those levels. And because it's all about quality, of course, cost, and also experience. So those 3 things, and maybe experience / qualifications, right? So those 3 things will determine which partner is best qualified for that task. And we hope, of course, that, for instance, we can work with ALP qualified trainers, or that with so much work has already been done by AMEA, by other partners. So this is where I think we need to really be curious to see what happened already in those countries, in those sectors, who is already, and not always going to the easy partner that you've already worked with before, but really taking a step back and thinking, okay, is this our best partner for this work? And be critical on that. So being more, making partners more accountable, because I think that's also important, because we see the usual suspects in the usual consortia. I hope I'm not now making a few people angry. This is sometimes our role, I think. But I think how can we choose the right partners? Who is the right partner based on, measurable criteria? And think, okay, that should be then the best partner for the job. And if we do it that way, and then you will get this competition of saying, hey, but I'm also a good BDS provider. Why can't I do this? And then people will come up and say, hey, these are my credentials. Please consider me. And then why not, right? If they comply and if they meet those expectations, then perfect partner.
No, thank you. Yeah, no, definitely. I think we're going to be all waiting for the announcements of the pilots and further instruction on how to get involved. I just want to ask the audience if there are any final questions. We have time for more questions if you have them, but also I don't think it's needed. If there you go, Renee.
Renee, you're our savior.
Yes, I want to mention a case we had here in Latin America, and I think Jorge Wapaya is in the chat and listening, but has some difficulties in expressing himself in English. So I just want to mention that he has used the scope tools in a project that they were designing together with USAID. It was said to be a co-creation of a project. So our expectations were also, how will USAID, in its project-oriented way of thinking, go about it? Up to now, what they have learned, what Jorge told me, is that it has been beneficial for them as chorus, as Lutheran World Relief, and for the leaders of the cacao cooperatives in department in Peru, for learning what is a business about, because that was the big question, and how they can convince also USAID in this. So up to now, the learning has taken place more on the field level between the staff of Lutheran World Relief and the business leaders of those women cooperatives. But we expect that this can also have a certain influence in USAID, seeing a little bit beyond the boundaries of project limited thinking.
Oh, that would be very exciting. Jorge, if you want to share your story in Spanish, please do. You're mute.
Okay. Muchas gracias. Sí, siento mucho. Sorry, but my English is very basic. Oh, no problem. Sí, realmente hay dos palabras que pueden definir la experiencia de uso de la herramienta SCOPEinsight en el BRAE, ¿no? Emoción y aprendizaje. Es una herramienta que fue utilizada para hacer un autoanálisis por parte de los directivos, las directivas de una organización, una cooperativa de mujeres productoras de cacao. Y yo pude observar durante todo el proceso cómo es que era un proceso de descubrimiento para ellas, ¿no? Todos los aspectos que significaban gestionar una organización de manera empresarial, ¿no? Entonces, cuando se discutía qué tipo de herramientas, reglamentos, normas debían tener, entonces se daban cuenta que lo tenían o no lo tenían suficientemente claro y desarrollado, necesitaban hacerlo. Entonces, fue un aprendizaje muy importante para mujeres normalmente productoras, ¿no? Pero ahora, a cargo de las cooperativas, eran también dirigentes y necesitaban gerenciar una organización, ¿no? Entonces, por lo tanto, necesitan nuevos conocimientos distintos al manejo de una finca de cacao, ¿no? Tenían que saber costos, mercados, precios, servicios, contratación de servicios, tiempos, plazos, compromisos, contratos. Y a pesar de que fue solamente la herramienta SCOPEinsight, no fue el PRO que daría más elementos, ¿no? Y sin embargo sí pudieron detectar las brechas y sobre todo la gran debilidad de esta cooperativa, ellas se dieron cuenta, y yo también, que era la parte financiera, la gestión financiera. Y entonces la siguiente vez que le apliquemos, vamos a aplicar el Scope Pro, que seguramente va a ser más útil, ¿no? Muchas gracias y lo siento nuevamente. Me siento mal por no hablar el inglés con ustedes.
No se preocupe, Jorge. Un gusto pues tenerlo acá, y creo que varios de los que están aquí presentes pueden entender también la versión en español, pero en resumen, sorry, I was thinking
In English,
I was
please.
talking in Spanish and in English. It's what Jorge already explained here is that two basic things came out of the experience of applying SCOPEinsight, is the emotion that it stirred up in the leaders, as well as the learning of itself, how the state of their enterprises, their cooperatives are, and what they have to learn. As it was only SCOPEinsight, of course, the financials were lacking there, and that has been the delicate and most difficult part in tackling the capacities of the cooperatives. So that will be done with the Scope Pro applied in the next round.
Yeah, very interesting. Muchas gracias for sharing.
Oh, gracias, Maris. Oh, yes.
I have colleagues here, Renier speaks Spanish, so everything is captured. So
yes.
Certainly do.
I understand English in 60%.
Well, I understand Spanish 20%.
Okay.
Well, thank you for sharing your learning experience. They're really interesting. Any more questions? Yeah, Maurice, please go ahead.
Yeah, one follow-up question, because I think it's important what René mentioned. What would be a way that if USAID would be interested, if they see this beyond the project, how do you see that? How could that, because we have never been able to have that conversation even. So are there any ideas on how we can maybe jointly sort of break this open?
Perhaps some words on that. We've tried to make contact with USAID here in Honduras, still not in Peru. It was in the plans. And we see that the officials that work in the field and on the level of the country are very much interested in the proposal that we have as AMEA, but it doesn't get traction within USAID as a whole. It's quite complex. That's also what they themselves explain. So getting influence in the way they start working on new projects is still a little bit far away. But now with a new localization agenda that they are trying to get in the different countries, there might be a more openness to discuss these things also.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Yeah, and I think it really is true, because we have had those conversations with USAID, for instance, at country level, and then they are definitely more open to exploring and yeah, doing new things, I think. Innovation.
Dana, yes, please.
Hi. Yeah, I think that's a good point. And as Renee says, with USAID's increasing focus on localization and local actors, and it would seem that there might be some potential for organizations that have been or are interested in using SCOPEinsight that are able to secure USAID funds to just include SCOPEinsight tools as a mechanism in their own sort of internal evaluative criteria as a way, because I mean, as USAID has had these localization conversations, the big concern is always around the risks that come for USAID with using local actors in terms of you just don't kind of have that track record of financial stability or that ability to sort of judiciously use US government dollars, right? And so that's like one of the big challenges that USAID has focused on in all their conversations about localization. And so a tool like SCOPEinsight could be a mechanism to sort of to allay those concerns for USAID and move that towards using like an external mechanism to show local actors can judiciously use those funds. And so I would think that could be an entry point potentially, is via individual projects, and then looking forward in terms of how you then if you reach a point where you've got sort of a few different USAID projects that are using SCOPEinsight tools, bringing that together in some sort of, like USAID will occasionally do brown bags or whatnot, and showcase that effort. I think that could potentially be a good avenue to make some ground there.
Yeah, I think, Dana, you hit the nail on the head. That's a Dutch expression. I don't know if that's also an English one. But I think we have been indeed talking to some of our partners who in programs with USAID money are looking into how can we localize it. So that has been a conversation, but you added another level to that conversation, which I think is really interesting. Because if we can showcase this at different levels and bring that together, then you can really, for me, that's almost already like that, bringing pieces of that puzzle of that ecosystem together, which can be really interesting, of course. And the more that this comes together in that local localization, the better these organizations can develop their business plans and their going forward. because then they know that there's a market for them. And this is what we see with, and to be very honest, this is almost the most fun part of my job, is to work with these local experts, as we call them, and how inspiring they are, how entrepreneurial they are. Yeah, then we're talking from one entrepreneur to another. And it really, yeah, there's this bond, and we help each other and say, but what if you do it this way, or show your pricing this way, then maybe then you can really increase your business. And also we're looking into see how we can get them to be better trainers. So yeah, everything we can do to make that happen, but it's of course easier to do that within a program where you can from scratch say, okay, this is our goal. We're going to find 3, 4, 5, I don't know how many local partners who are going to do this. And we're going to, in the next 3 years, get them to a level that when you phase out, it's still there. And if we can show that, and then I think that that's something that's, yeah, I like it a lot, those local entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Dana and Maurice, for his reflections as well. And with that, I would like to ask, does anyone have any follow-up questions regarding this topic, or would like to ask another question?
I can follow up maybe with one more. I don't know if it's really a question or amusing. But so I work with our newer Nigeria team, and in the area that we work, there really aren't, like, local banking is not kind of an option yet at this point, but there are a number of federal government programs that provide agricultural financing. So I don't know if, Maurice, if you or others, if you've got experience in reaching sort of government actor, local federal government actors, in terms of the SCOPEinsight tools as being a mechanism to access finance for, you were talking a bit more about earlier in the talk about the tool as a way to access finance, but if you've had much luck doing that with sort of like federal ag financing programs.
No, but then you're not talking to the expert. So I don't know how to answer that question. I would divert you to Pearl Mutual, our local partner. They know a lot about access to finance and how to organize that. They know the banks, they know, they can even advise on that, but they probably also can answer this question. They also even have their own fund, so they're very active in trying to get financing to agriculture. So yeah, I'm not the expert on this topic, sorry. So please go local. Yeah, but I'd be happy to introduce you to them.
Yeah, so I think if there's no more questions, I think I'm going to end this webinar here, unless Maurice, you have a question for the audience. It's also feel free to do so. And just as information for the audience, we're going to be sharing the recording, the summary, and the presentation slides probably next week. Yeah, stay tuned, and you're going to have access to Maurice's contact as well, if you don't have it. Yeah, and yeah, my final question, I think, is that I hope it was clear that we are dependent on feedback. So please, any idea, request, comment, or criticism, always welcome. So please share that. Yeah, and I hope that we can jointly do and explore ways that we can scale up, test things, pilot things, maybe even on very small scale self-assessments. I know that my colleague Ardevan, who's here, he doesn't like that. He's all about data, so he will be the critical one. But let's explore, let's open up, let's explore, and we're open to any ideas. So if you have them, please reach out. Yeah, so thank you to everyone who stayed with us until now. And thank you, Maurice, for the presentation. Definitely very inspired. So the next presentation will be with, well, Wednesday, not Thursday, because of Thanksgiving in the United States. And we'll be with ICRA, presenting the agribusiness curriculum. So hopefully we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Felipe, for organizing.